Now, Stone Soldier, destroy the moon!
Oh, okay.
I've made quite a few videos talking about Yu-Gi-Oh characters, and don't get me wrong, I've got a ton of topics to cover in that regard for a long time. But one aspect I feel like I can really talk about more of is the actual decks of the characters. Not only because there's a lot of symbolism that one can have in a deck, but also from a gameplay perspective, I feel like there's a lot you can look at when it comes to a duelist and the cards they choose. For example, Yusei Fudo's deck is consisting of trash-based cards and cards with weak stats, with a focus on bonds, and that can really represent not only the origins of the character, but also the main themes of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. But I really want to focus more on the actual deck building aspect. Now, this isn't going to be a "he's not playing meta" or "he's not running Ash Blossom" kind of video. This is to look at a character's deck and really point out the strengths and weaknesses of it, while also taking account of the time and the anime itself. So today I want to look at the one, the only, Yugimoto Yami Yugi's deck. Look at some of the more iconic cards and explain why the deck really shouldn't work. Spoilers for the anime here and there. I'm Manga Kamen, and let's duel.
It's time to
There's one thing to really consider when it comes to Yugi's deck, and that's because there's a very wide variety of monster types in it. I'm talking spellcasters, warriors, fiends, fairies, rocks, beasts, machines, and dragons. It's a pretty big pool of monster types, and that can be a bit of an issue for quite a few reasons. The first reason is there isn't a lot of consistency to be had here, and what I mean by that is typically you want there to be synergy with your monsters, spells, and traps that you have access in order to empower your monsters, remove your opponent's cards, and of course have access to your own resources, your deck, graveyard, what have you. Now, this isn't me saying that if Yugi had more modern cards that fix the issue. The issue is that if you look at Yugi's Battle City deck, you look at a good number of his support, spell, and trap cards, a small chunk of his monster support spells, Magical Dimension, Magic Formula, Diffusion Wave Motion, Ragnarok, these cards either require generic spellcasters or specific ones in order to be useful. And how many spellcasters does Yugi have in Battle City? 2. Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. 3 if you count Dark Paladin. If you have a limited amount of monster type cards, then including cards that require that type isn't that smart thing to do since you can brick yourself. If Yugi ran more spellcasters, then there would be more justification to include these cards, though not by a lot. In later arcs and iterations, there would be more spellcasters added. Breaker the Magical Warrior, Magician's Valkyria, Old Vindictive Magician, Skilled Dark Magician, and the Magician Girl archetype, just to name a few. Most of the time, they would be regulated to either one-shot appearances, movie appearances, or just be necessary to discard. A lot of the time, Yugi's deck gets called a spellcaster deck, but there's a noticeable lack of magicians in it. The amount of types in the deck offer a bit of a jumbled up combination, and with some cards, it makes it a bit more difficult to use, especially since there are specific requirements to use them. Take Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast and its two components, Baphomet and Gazelle. In order to fusion summon this monster, you also need polymerization to bring it out. That's a total of 3 cards that only have synergy with 2 of them. With Baphomet's on summon ability would allow you to search for a Gazelle, but that leaves a lot to be desired since it requires you to still have polymerization in your hand to pull off this combo, and there wasn't a reliable way to search of it during this time, save for Fusion Sage. The Magnet Warriors are also an interesting case since they are decent level 4 monsters that have decent stats at the time, but they lack any real searchability or synergy with Yugi's deck, especially during Battle City. The Face Knight cards, Queens, Kings, and Jack's Knights are also in this camp as well, which when you look at how they're supposed to be played, you're supposed to have Queen's Knight on the field first, then summon King's Knight, which activates its effect and allows you to summon Jack's Knight from the deck. And they actually nerfed King's Knight in the actual card game. In the anime, you could have normal or special summon King's Knight and his effect would activate, but in the actual card game, you could only normal summon him to use the effect? Why? Would have been that broken to do that? During this time though, there wasn't a real great way to search for these cards, but there definitely was a better way to optimize your deck with these. Though to be fair, I shouldn't say you couldn't run a deck with multiple types, especially in early Yu-Gi-Oh! GOAT format was a thing and had a number of decks in it that utilized various monster types. Because I want to make it clear, eventually Yugi's deck would get some good searchers that were more generic, which are the Black Forest and Sangan, arguably some of the best monster searchers back in the day, which would allow you to get any monsters that have 1500 or less attack or defense respectively. But these are more generic based searchers and have limitations on what they can search. Plus, Yugi didn't really get them until later in the anime, with one of them being in regular Yugi's deck in the final duel. Back when Yu-Gi-Oh's card game first came out in the manga and the Duelist Kingdom days, the rules of the game were extremely different. You basically could summon any monster you wanted from your hand regardless of their level. Duelist Kingdom allowed Yugi to basically summon any monster with a higher level than 4 in the moment he drew it. Just in case we're talking to someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh have levels, ranging from 1 to 12, remembered by a number of stars on their card. In standard play, monsters with levels 1 through 4 can be summoned with no cost. However, in order to summon a 5 or 6 starred monster, you'd have to tribute one monster on the field on your side before playing it. Anything higher than that requires 2 tributes. It's pretty simple stuff, all things considered. Back when the game was a lot slower, you'd want to limit the number of high-level monsters in your deck, so you wouldn't run the risk of being bricked by a card you can't play and allow your opponent a chance to smack you down. With that in mind, how many high-level monsters do you think Yugi has in his Battle City deck? Let's run through them. Jax Knight, Red Eyes Black Dragon, Buster Blader, Summon Skull, Beast of Guilford, Baphomet, Valkyrian the Magna Warrior, Dark Magician Girl, and of course, Dark Magician. That's 8 in total, and a standard deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is 40 cards, so you'll be dedicating about 20% of your deck to these monsters. One of which, Valkyrian, is a monster you can't summon via regular tribute. You need to send all 3 of the Magnet Warriors to put him out on the field. From your hand or field you can discard them, but it's still a dead draw if you do that and don't have the right components. Unless Yugi already has a field that he can sacrifice monsters, using these cards will be a dead draw since they can't be summoned without tribute. You'll also notice I did include a few certain cards in this list as well. Those I'm saying for a different video. Later on in the anime, Yugi would add cards like Skilled Dark Magician, a card that can summon out the Dark Magician from his hand, deck, or graveyard, so it would be a lot easier to summon that high-level card. Though I'm reminded a lot of people pointing out the fact that Summon Skull should have been Yugi's actual ace. It has the same attack points as Dark Magician, but required 1 less tribute to summon. I don't really agree with that, especially when you consider there are faster ways to bring out Dark Magician rather than Summon Skull. The aforementioned Skilled Dark Magician, Magical Academy, Dark Renewal, Magician's Circle, Magical Dimension, cards that are more geared towards the Dark Magician, and other cards like Beast of Guilford weren't really used as an actual monster summon, but rather for its effect to equip to another monster and lower its strength when it's sent to the graveyard. The point is, the main detriment of these cards is they can be dead draws and leave you with nothing. But in later seasons, Yugi would add other high tribute monsters like Des Voltscalf, Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight, Mirage Knight, as well as ritual monsters too like Blackluster Soldier, Magician of Black Chaos, Catapult Turtle. Though one thing I should also bring up is that a lot of the time Yugi will add or remove certain cards in his deck, so that's something to bring up as well just to be fair. And some of the cards I've listed will have other things considered, like Swift Gaia, but I want to be fair in this video even though Yugi likes to cheat a lot with the heart of the cards. This is arguably one of the smaller issues with Yugi's deck, but a lot of his cards are vanilla normal monsters. It's a problem that Yugi does change things up eventually, but it's necessary to bring this up. Normal monsters, if the name didn't give it away, are monsters that don't have effects to them. Typically during this time of Yu-Gi-Oh, the idea was that normal monsters would have stronger stats to them. Meanwhile, weaker monsters would be trickier and have effects that would make them a threat as well. God, imagine just 25 years ago and the cards available today would blow the minds out of everyone. You got Kashtira, you got Yummy, you got Malice, goddamn Malice. But yeah, a lot of Yugi's cards are normal monsters that, in all honesty, don't have a lot of power to them. At best, you'll have the Magnet Warriors, with Beta being the strongest of the trio, and Giant Soldier of Stone and Mystical Elf both being good defensive walls of 2000 defense with no tribute needed. And to be fair, Yugi would get upgrades in the anime, such as Obnoxious Celtic Guard, a retrain of the Celtic Guardian which would be a good defensive wall since the monster couldn't be destroyed in battle with monsters that have 1900 or more attack points. Or Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight, which if it's the last card in your hand, you can summon this 7-star 2300 attack warrior without tribute. And I've already brought up Skilled Dark Magician. And there are other monsters like Vindictive Old Magician, Karibo, Witch of the Black Forest, Sangan, the Rock Spirit, 4-starred Ladybug of Doom, Watapon. These can be decent cards, especially for the time, whether it's to remove cards from your opponent, get a body on the field, or search for other things in your deck. The problem with the normal monsters though is that they don't do anything proactive. No popping opponents' cards with effects, no searching combo pieces, no stat boosts. You're banking on raw stats in a format where effects can win. The Magnet Warriors were decent stats with good defense, and Beta had a decent attack stat, but they're just walls. And some effects really aren't that great. Dark Magician Girl, despite her iconic status and the fact I have a binder full of her cards, isn't that great of an effect monster. She gains 300 attack points for each Dark Magician in each player's graveyard, but since Yugi only runs one Dark Magician, unless you get a match like against Arcana, you're not going to get a lot out of that effect. Buster Blader is a great monster to side against a character like Kaiba, a guy who's so obsessed with dragons that he paid God knows how much money for a jet that looks like the Blue Eyes White Dragon, and then was doing this.
Cause I figure, if there is intelligent life out there, then let's teach them how to duel.
But otherwise, it's another high tribute monster that's going to rely on your opponent's deck to be effective. I do want to point out that a lot of the cards I brought up do get support in the future that can make them viable. Hell, just recently we got Magnet Warrior support, which, while is more effective when ignoring every Magnet Warrior that Yugi used in his tenure of the cards, can still make them a powerful strategy. Buster Blader got support that helps quell the issue I brought up by having cards that can turn your opponent's monsters into dragons. And who could forget the plethora of Dark Magician support that we keep getting? And that's not even talking about the upcoming full art retrains that we're getting. Like, have you seen this Dark Magician? Not only does this card give it the ability to summon itself from your hand, it searches a card related to the Dark Magician on summon, and can even wipe out your opponent's spells and trap cards from the board. Hell, even the upgraded Kuriboh helps out Dark Magician too. Stuff like this can fix a lot of the issues in Yugi's deck, allowing him a lot more consistency to get out the cards he wants, like the Dark Magician, which is his signature card. Again though, I'm only bringing this up because these cards can get viable in the right hands. Hell, there was even a strategy with the Magnet Warriors that was in GOAT format. But the problem is, though, there's not a lot of synergy and the effects are kind of random too. We spent a good amount of time talking about the monsters in Yugi's deck, but what about the other parts? One of the fundamental rules in Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least in its inception, is that you can't just win with monsters. You need to have a balance of spells and traps to help support your monsters. Well, nowadays we know that can be complete bullshit, since Super Heavy Samurai are a thing, but when it comes to the spell and trap card pool, there's a bit of an issue that needs to be brought up. I did bring up in how some cases adding cards that boost up his spellcasters is a bad idea since most of his deck is filled with other types of monsters. But the other thing we need to talk about is the roster of spell and traps. Typically when you run these support cards, they're supposed to help you get you more resources into your hand, empower your own monsters, or be a detriment to your opponent. And don't get it twisted, Yugi does have a lot of great cards at his disposal. Magical Cylinder, Card of Sanctity, Swords of Revealing Light, Dust Tornado, Monster Reborn, Graceful Charity, and of course the one and only Pot of Greed.
What does that do?
But at other times, there are spells and traps that tend to be odd choices. One card to give an example is Exile the Wicked. It's a normal spell that destroys all fiends on the field, which isn't a bad idea in concept, especially if you know you're going to be facing a duelist using fiend monsters in their deck. But against anyone else, it's nothing more than fodder. If anything, you should be running a card like Black Hole instead. It's a generic spell that pops every monster in the field when played. Or Regeki, which destroys only your opponent's monsters. These are more versatile cards to use than Exile the Wicked. Then there's Multiply. It's a rather iconic spell card since it's arguably the card that allowed Yugi to defeat Pegasus in Duelist Kingdom.
No, this can't be!
Yes, and I activated my other down card, Multiply. One Kuriboh is becoming many.
And if you're running multiple Kuriboh in your deck, then adding this card would be justifiable, but Yugi only runs one. Later on in the final duel, Yugi adds some support cards to his Magnet Warriors, Magnet Reverse and Magnet Force, which to be fair, generally support both rock and machine type cards, which in this duel, Yugi does pack more rock types, and even rocks with the gadget cards. They're not the best cards though, but they do help with the strategy he's going for. And hey, he's even got a powerful new spell card, Ties of the Brethren, a powerful spell that for the cost of 1,000 life points can allow you to summon up to 2 level 4 monsters with the same type as a monster you control. Sure, they can't be tributed or attack, but you can use that to bust out the 3 Magnet Warriors a lot easier, and in turn bring out Valkyrion since his summon requirement isn't a tribute summon. But there are still issues here. His deck doesn't have a lot of draw power, and the ability to get the cards you want isn't applicable. Most of the Yugi spells and traps also have some niche uses, Chain Destruction being a prime example. It's a trap card that destroys every copy of a card that a player uses when they summon a monster to the field, and it destroys them from both the hand and the deck. It was useful against the first rare hunter of Battle City, erasing the other copies of Exodia's head and preventing him from collecting Exodia into his hand and winning, and we see in other episodes that Yugi still has the card in his deck. Now, you can theoretically use this card to mill copies of monsters from your own deck, but that's not something Yugi ever really does. And he can't really do that since he doesn't have multiple copies of his cards in his deck. Line of Intervention is another trap card, a continuous trap that prevents monsters from being set face down and need to be summoned in face up defense position. It's useful to prevent clip effect monsters, but otherwise it's a useless card. Collected Power is a trap card that takes all equipped cards on the field and equips them to a single monster that of your choice. Kind of niche if your opponent doesn't even play any equipped cards. 5-Star Twilight is a normal spell that allows you to tribute a level 5 monster from your hand to special summon the 5 Kuriboh brothers from your deck or hand. You need a specific leveled monster on the field to work, or otherwise this is a dead draw unless you already have the necessary cards on the field. With the aforementioned cards I brought up earlier, you can probably already see the issue with a number of Yugi's choices, or I hope you guys can, and that's the fact that Yugi uses a ton of cards that are highly specialized but have too much of a diversity of card types that can't properly utilize them effectively. A lot of the cards, especially the spells and traps, don't have a lot of searchability, and while Yugi's deck is a decent draw power to it, a lot of the time his cards rely on luck, or if you want to be a bit more cynical, the heart of the cards. Now, if you guys are actually paying attention to what I'm saying and not just using this video as background footage for drawing, editing, or whatever, I think you get the idea of what the biggest issue is with Yugi's deck, and that's the fact that a lot of Yugi's cards have a lot of diversity to types and effects. The idea behind Yugi's deck is that it's supposed to have an answer to multiple problems that can crop up in a duel. From a storytelling perspective, it's fine. It makes for some really fun and epic duels, especially when it's epic moments like this.
I get it!
But when you look at his deck from an actual deck building perspective, there isn't a lot of synergy with his cards, and realistically, a lot of the time, Yugi be reliant on the plot or luck. It's been a main issue with Yugi's deck. The fact that a lot of his cards are all based upon a lot of randomness, and the support cards are either going to be dead draws or they won't be useful in the moment. And when you're playing a card game, you want to focus on cards that have synergy so you can avoid dead draws. Now, I'm not trying to say that Yugi needs to run the best cards in all time, because the idea behind Yugi's deck is that it's a gift from his grandfather and it's filled with cards that Yugi would say as...
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba.
Objectively, there are pathetic cards in that deck, and even more so in Yugi's deck in the future. Throughout this entire video, I made it clear that the biggest issue that Yugi's deck has is that it has too much versatility. A proper phrase for this is, a jack of all trades but a master of none. While Yugi's deck can actually account for a variety of situations because of all the diversity of monster types and the overspecification of support cards, it can lead to a lot of dead draws.
What am I gonna do? None of these cards can help me!
On paper, Yugi's deck shouldn't work. And while I'm not going to repeat myself, you need to ask the right question. How does this deck manage to rack up so many wins? Well, for that, we need to look towards another quote.
The person who'd win in a fight is the person that the scriptwriter wants to win.
Yeah, I'm stating the obvious now, but it has to be said. Part of the reason why Yugi wins a lot of the time in the anime is because he's the protagonist, and sometimes he'll bust out cards that just so happen to be just what he needs in order to survive for a few turns or even turn the match around.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Either that or his opponents get too cocky and make mistakes.
It's true! A female dark magician!
Dark Magician Girl gains 300 extra attack points for every Dark Magician that's inside the card graveyard. If you were a master of the Dark Magician, you would have seen the answer in front of you.
What?
But that's what stories are about, and in Yugi in particular, because while a lot of Yugi's deck is a mishmash of cards, it's built upon some very flimsy strategies and out there synergy. It still works because that's what entertainment is all about. So whether it's to blind Pegasus' big boss monster with a bunch of self-destructing Karibos, trouncing Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragons with Dark Paladin, or having the Dark Magician Girl appear onto the field and destroy the evil Arcana Dark Magician, one thing can be said about Yugi and his deck choices.
He duels with honor and respect!
From a storytelling and entertainment perspective, Yugi's deck is iconic, but I still wouldn't recommend running Yugi's deck at any tournament, especially nowadays. I think I want to cap off this segment by talking about how there are a lot of retrains based on Yugi's deck. A lot of Yugi's iconic cards have either gotten some pretty fun legacy support or become full-on archetypes on their own. Hell, Karibo's basically gotten a ton of support over the years. A lot of Yugi's cards got retrained to become part of the Shining Sarcophagus archetype that gave a lot of Yugi's iconic cards a defining element that gave them synergy. It's not impossible that the individual cards work, get upgrades, and become more viable in future support, but altogether they can't really form an effective deck. Still entertaining though. To be frank, there are a lot more issues that we could go over with Yugi's deck, but I feel like we've covered most of the bigger problems when it comes to the King of Games. Though to be completely fair, there are a number of decks that Yugi went through throughout the entire series. He had a number of different cards that he would splice into his deck, but would often keep the same basic theming to it. This video isn't to tear down the King of Games or his deck, but rather to analyze it and talk about the weaknesses that there are in it. But he's not the only duelist I want to talk about with this series, but who do I talk about next? Well, it's up to you really. If you want me to cover the Slifer Slactor of Duel Academy, Jay and Yuki and his rather confusing deck, be sure to like the video and put down in the comments, get your game on! Or if you're more interested in sticking with duel monsters, how about we talk about the
Godfather of games, capiche?
the one and only Joey Wheeler. Be sure to like the video too and put in the comments, Brooklyn Rage. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you did, hope you have a lovely day. I'm Coming, and it's time to duel. Hey, major thanks to my supporters on Patreon, Ko-Fi, and channel members. These amazing people like Bloody Eclipse, Red Jester, Emily Infinite, Raven Gutiana, Odd Emerald Zone, Atheon, Saki Eclipse, Miles Vega, Mike Soul, and Shadow Pain. Thanks again for supporting me. Your contributions help me and my editors continue to make amazing content for you all to enjoy. And if you want to see your name amongst these great people, check things out down below in the description to find out how. And hey, if you liked the video, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and if you're on mobile, use the hype feature to help push the video more into the algorithm. This stuff helps out well, and most of it is free. And if you reach this part of the video, YouTube thinks you'd like to see these videos, so be sure to check them out. Coming out.